Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I'd like to join all others in saying that I have felt your appearances, which I followed very carefully. I was in attendance at the House yesterday. Have been very productive. There have been forceful statements. There have been objective statements, and I think very credible statements. And I commend you for this public service that each of you are performing. This is a critical time in our contemporary history of this country, and we're on the threshold of a very important message that our President will deliver regarding the forward strategy. He'll deliver that presumably in the coming few days. John Petraeus, I followed with great interest your career, and I've gotten to know you quite well, and I value our professional association. But you wrote a letter to your troops. It says as follows: many of us had hoped this summer would be a time of tangible political process at the national level as well. One of the justifications for the surge, after all, was that it would help create the space for Iraqi leaders to tackle the tough questions and agree on key pieces of national reconciliation legislation. You concluded with this simple sentence: it has not worked out as we had hoped. On what facts did you predicate that hope that you had?
Well, sir, I guess on the projections that were made by, in many cases, those who came before us. There were plans laid out of when certain pieces of legislation would be dealt with and so forth. And the plain and simple fact is that they were not, and I needed to level with our troops and tell them that that was the case.
Let me go on quickly. You value intelligence as a military man.
Yes, sir.
We have, I think, a very fine system of intelligence now. Listen to what they said in January of 2007 with the NIE. And I quote from the NIE: even if violence is diminished, given the current winner-take-all attitude and sectarian animosities infecting the political scene, Iraqi leaders will be hard-pressed to achieve sustained political reconciliation. Now, in January, there was a very positive message to all, including you. Now you come to August of this year. The NIE assesses that broadly accepted political compromises required for sustained security, long-term political process, and economic development are unlikely to emerge unless there is a fundamental shift in the factors driving Iraqi political insecurity. And the NIE went on to say, quote, that the Iraqi government will become more precarious over the next 6 to 12 months. How has this intelligence reports, which I'm sure you respect?
I do.
How has this shaped your message to Congress and your advice you're now giving the President of the United States?
For one, it has made it realistic, and as I have mentioned to the other committees, I am not a pessimist or an optimist at this point. I am realist about Iraq, and Iraq is hard. What gives, again, some hope is the willingness of Prime Minister Maliki, although it's difficult for him to cobble together all the different elements that are required to agree on legislation, but he has given direction, the formation of the National Reconciliation Committee that works with the engagement cell that the ambassador and I have created, a British two-star and a senior diplomat, to try to embrace and facilitate these local initiatives being connected to the national government, and that has been
General,
a
I'd have to
positive
tell you my own personal view is that I think the local activities of what they call bottom-up reconciliation are just coming into being. I mean, it's just come into the lexicon, the debates that we've had in these 5 years. We've never seen it before. It's a little too early, I think, to put much credit on them, but let's think for the future positively. We've got to have bottom-up, top-down, not bottom-up reconciliation to meet the maxims that we've operated on, and witnesses at that table have said for years. There is no military solution to this. It's got to be a political reconciliation to have a unity government. That brings you up, Mr. Ambassador. Again, you're giving advice to the President. And the President's message is going to take this debate, as it should, from the halls of the Congress into every city, village, and town and crossroads in this country, into most of the capital of the world, and most particularly in the Middle East. Credibility of the United States is on the line, and we've got to help the President, all of us, in my judgment, to get it right. I don't feel that this current status of the Iraqi government, and I'm not going to use all the adjectives dysfunctional, it's all been laid out very carefully by each of you over these days. But in January, the President, in that January 10th message, and I've read it and reread it many times, it is clear that that reconciliation was a concept, it was a building block to justify going forward with the surge. I do not think that the forward strategy that will be announced by the President in a matter of days can once again use the concept of top-down reconciliation as a building block for that strategy he will announce to our nation. Do you agree or disagree with me?
Sir, as you and others of your colleagues have remarked, as we have said, national reconciliation, political reconciliation is ultimately what success will be all about in Iraq if it's achieved. So I think whether it is top-down or bottom-up, or, which is actually the case, both, that remains critically important. I'd make just a couple of quick points. First, as General Petraeus said, Iraq is hard, and reconciliation is hard, particularly when you're looking at it against the backdrop of the levels of violence the country has experienced over the last year and a half.
Now, simply, do you think it's going to be a part of the fundamental, factual basis of support for the new strategy?
Well,
We're betting on it happening at some point in time?
I think that the essence of success in Iraq for Iraqis, as well as for our own goals, centers around a successful national reconciliation process that is going to have both bottom-up and top-down elements.
That's what's been said at this table for a long time, sir, and I respect you. It hadn't happened. I want to ask one last question to the General. Again, my respect for you and how I've come to know you, you feel very, very deeply. Every single soldier, airman, Marine, sailor that you have under your command. And I think back about George Marshall in World War II, when he was faced with decisions in every respect. You faced the same tough decisions that he and Eisenhower and others faced in that period. And he said in his diary, I was very careful to send to President Roosevelt every few days a statement of our casualties. I tried to keep before him all the time the casualty results, because you get hardened to these things, and yet you have to be very careful to keep them always in the forefront of your mind. End quote. Interesting. Fascinating. I'm confident that you do that. And you're advising our President now on a strategy. We don't know what it will be. But I hope that if in any way you disagree, that you will so advise him. And secondly, I hope in the recesses of your heart that you know that strategy will continue the casualties, stress on our forces, stress on military families, stress on all Americans. Are you able to say at this time, if we continue what you have laid before the Congress here as a strategy, do you feel that that is making America safer?
Sir, I believe that this is indeed the best course of action to achieve our objectives in Iraq.
Does that make America safer?
Sir, I don't know, actually. I have not sat down and sorted out in my own mind. What I have focused on and been riveted on is how to accomplish the mission of the multinational force Iraq. I have not stepped back to look at, and you've heard with other committees, in fact, you know, what is the impact on, I've certainly taken into account the impact on the military. The strain on our ground forces in particular has very much been a factor in my recommendations. But I have tried to focus on doing what I think a commander is supposed to do, which is to determine the best recommendations to achieve the objectives of the policy from which his mission is derived. And that is what I have sought to do, sir.
Well, once the President makes his statement, I hope you do consider it very carefully, as I know you will. I thank the Chair.